I want you to imagine that you're thirsty. Perhaps it's a hot summer's day. The sun is beating down on you, and all you can think about is sitting down to take a drink. As you reach for your glass, you can see that the fresh liquid inside is so chilled, so cold, that beads of moisture are condensing and dripping down inside. At the first sip, perfection. Nothing's ever tasted so good. So I have to ask you, what's in the glass? If what you dreamed about was beer, then this speech is for you. And if not, perhaps I can get you to reconsider the style and variety of this wonderfully delicious beverage. The crafting of beer predates written history and is shared by almost every people group on the planet. Because of this, it has developed into a vast plethora of variety. Today, I'm going to endeavor to give you an introduction to that plethora, to teach you about the two primary types of beer, to talk to you about some of my favorite imports, and lastly, to give you an idea of some of the domestic options that are available. The primary difference between beers is whether they are lagers or ales. Now, one is not necessarily stronger than the other. Either can be either dark or light. In fact, the difference to flavor is so subtle and slight, I won't define it by one key characteristic. So what are lagers? Well, the majority of beers in the world are actually lagers. These are cold brewed at temperatures between 38 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. They're also bottom fermented. That means that as it ferments, the yeast sink down to the bottom of the container. Ales, on the other hand, are very popular in the British Commonwealth and former British colonies. They are warm brewed at temperatures between 55 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and they are top fermented. The yeast float near the surface during fermentation. The yeasts used for ales and lagers are entirely different due to natural selection, as an ales yeast wouldn't survive in the cold temperatures needed for making a lager, and vice versa. However, in restaurants and markets, the two categories you find will not be ales and lagers as much as imports and domestics. So let's talk about some of my favorite imports. For instance, this is German beers. Very rich, dark. This is largely due to the Bavarian Purity Act of 1516, which limited beer making to 3 ingredients: water, barley, and hops. A sour, somewhat bitter herb used for preservation. A traditional beer of this type is the Marzen, a rich, pale lager, incredibly tasty, as opposed to the Hefeweizen, very popular these days. But the Hefeweizen is a crisp, clean wheat beer. They're often unhopped, but the wheat would have made a band. Personally, I prefer Belgian beers. I find a wider variety and very high quality. For instance, there's the Trappist brews. The Trappists, or the Cistercians of the strict observance, are a Roman Catholic monastic order that produces high-quality foods and drink for sale to support their monastery. The beers made by these monks are often considered the most refined in all the world. 6 of the 8 Trappist breweries are found in Belgium. Belgium also brings us the Lambrix from Brussels. It's a slightly sour, fruity beer, fruity wheat beer. Very tasty on holidays. One could also look to Britain, as many of their styles are very popular in the US. For instance, the Porter, a rich, dark brown ale, named after the dock workers who favored it. There's also the IPA, India Pale Ale. This is a sour and bitter, light ale, often heavily spiced and heavily hopped, called hoppy. This barely scratches the surface of the beers offered by these countries, not to mention the many wonderful contributions made worldwide. However, America has become known internationally for its ultra-pale lager. Major breweries like Michelob, Coors, Budweiser, and Miller produce a product known as the American Light Lager. This is a very light, thin beer, not held in very high regard. Luckily for us Americans, we have a huge craft beer market. Now, the craft beer movement was started in 1965 by Fritz Maytag when he purchased the Anchor Brewing Company. He started a small line of high-quality beer. His competitors followed suit, and the market exploded. Today, labels like New Belgium, Firestone and Walker, and Avery can be found on market shelves nationwide. Sadly, many people still think of beer as a simple, weak drink, suitable only for the poor American underclass. But now that you know more about the varieties available, now that you know the difference between ales and lagers, and you've heard some of the imports and domestics, perhaps you can see how an elegant Trappist brew can be as refined as the finest French wine. Can you see the style and class available to us in this marvelously versatile drink?